Right, so that took a bit longer than I thought, but there's quite a lot of fixings and all sort of small numbers of fixings and parts to do this part of the deck. And I was going to go on and start looking ahead, but I just want to try and do this with this particular stage by stage. So again, I've collated all my fixings here. It is getting easier, but still, you know, when you've got two of these and four of these and two of those and one of this and one of that, it can take a bit of time. So also I'm going to start assembling this now, but I wanted to make sure I had the right orientation. So I've installed what is basically the shovel holder, making sure that the orientation is correct in accordance to the instructions, because I think it'd be quite easy to end up doing this the wrong way around if you're not careful. Simple mistake to make, very easy to avoid. So I've gone ahead and made up my sort of deck clamps, the larger of the deck clamps. You've seen how I've done those in the past, and I'm now going to start doing this, but just ahead of that, I gave this a bit of a sand down because it's just a lot easier and to handle the material. Plus also I think it'll be harder to sand this down once all the components are on ready for painting. I've gone ahead and sort of prepared and cleaned some of the other parts as well, just ahead of painting, just trying to think ahead. So I'm going to speed up this next stage while I sort of get my head round putting this together, but I'm probably going to start off with some of the easier sort of surface mounted parts before I go ahead and put the turret sort of device on and the collar. So yeah, I'm going to do all the top pieces, all the simple bits, and then we'll go ahead and construct what will eventually be the sort of bearings for the turret. So I'm going to speed this up. this part of the top deck completed. Reasonably straightforward, I guess. The only, I guess, a couple of things to just note, just to try and get this as central as possible, because there's a bit of tolerance of movement on the fixings. I used a couple of clamps just to try and position that, and then tighten up, or before I tightened everything up. So that's it really. So it seems to be working quite well. Very pleased with that. Now we're going to go on to the next stage, which is to complete the detailing on the top of this, and that is that involves doing some sort of detail painting to some of the tools and equipment, which I'm going to not do at this stage, but I will basically go on to carry on putting all the other parts on here, you know, the hatches and everything else. So we'll see how we get on with that. Right, just before I go on to complete the other part of the top deck, I thought I'd get this piece out of the way. So with the Armortek kit comes the sort of brass, really nicely CNC cut brass grills. Now there's no mention in the Armortek instructions about how you install these, but what I've seen on the internet shows me that they go here, and it's pretty obvious that they go there because the way they're sort of shaped in that manner. So you see that's intended to go there, and that's supposed to go there. Now as you can see, they've got the shape of these are made so that they're intended to fold these over, which, you know, in essence is straightforward enough. But when I was looking at this, I was thinking, well, if I do that, all these square fittings here are going to clash with the flap, and you're going to have to cut individually each one out. And I'm thinking, well, I don't understand the rationale behind that. Now I've got a really good reference book here to the late Tiger 1 variant, and these grills are shown, I can't really work out, they seem to be flat rather than folded, and they have various fixings in them. So I've gone through my box of bits and pieces, and I found some sort of scaled down little brass dome headed nuts. They're about just under 1.8 mil scale, so scaled up I guess they'd be around about the sort of 12 to 13, 14 millimeter fixing. And from what I can see in this reference book, it wouldn't be far off how they actually did that. So I'm going to, instead of folding these, I'm going to trim and cut them off, and then just basically super glue them onto the two decks. So how I do that is, just zoom out. So with a good metal straight edge, line up the two. Now if I was going to be folding these, I'll do pretty much the same thing, score them and then fold them. So I'm just going to be very careful with this. Mind your fingers always cut away from. So just, I don't know if you can see that that's actually got a score down it now. Now if I wanted to, I could fold that over using that score, but I will not. I'd rather just trim it and cut it. And I've got some snips that's designed to cut sheet metal, and with a little bit of care, and just using these score lines as a guideline for me, I'll be able to trim this. Obviously when you're working with such thin gauge brass like this, there is a tendency to, as you're working with it, to inadvertently bend it out of shape. But I've got my own probably unique way of sorting that out, which I'll show you. So I'll just put the final score on that. I mean, I've guessed if you're a purist, you would shake your head at what I'm doing right now, as far as the tank's concerned. But again, I think it's a personal thing, personal preference. So I'm now going to use my snips to cut using the score line. carefully. That's that. As you can see, it's starting to kind of bend out of shape. That's expected. Do the long edge now. And I was just thinking, well, instead of just gluing these straight to the top, I wanted to try and replicate some form of fixing, and I've got these little brass dome-headed nuts in my box of tricks. However, they are easily available on the internet. You just sort of do a search for miniature brass dome-headed nuts. They'll show up. Very inexpensive for what they are, I think. Do this next long edge. As I said, there's probably a few purists in there going, oh, what's he doing? But it's my tank. I want it to look how I want it. I mean, if you were absolutely purist, you wouldn't. You'd scratch build one. You wouldn't buy it from Armortek because it's fantastic scale and detail and everything else. But you know, you cannot, unless with a lot of modifications, and I know there's guys out there that do that. Get it anywhere near the actual tank, but I'd say it's a fantastic representation. And as I'm getting close almost to the final leg of my build, I'm starting to reflect on it, and I'm loved every minute of it. So, and can't wait till all the option packs start turning up. Start bringing this thing to life. And then final one. I mean, I've seen some of these builds, they don't even bother putting these grills on, but I think it's a nice touch, and when it's all painted, it's going to really add to it. And they supply them for you, but there's just no mention in the instructions of installing them. So that's that. And the only other thing I'm going to do is going to cut and remove that piece. And as you can see, it's a little bit bouncy. It's not going to go on there straight. So I have a very old way of doing this, and it's basically taking a long straight edge, metal thin gauge like that would be even better, and then just literally that's pretty much straightens that out. So that then just gets super glued into position, and then if you really wanted to, which I've done, I've just done it because I've used them, I've got these little scale nuts, put them around, just super glue them, and leave them overnight. I know super glue, but leave them overnight. I mean, these are done last night and they're really nice. They feel strong, and this isn't going anywhere. And of course, by the time you prime and paint that, it protects it even more. So I'm going to carry on doing this, and then I'm going to go back to the other half of the top deck. Right, so we're back to this section of the tank, the top sort of deck. I've gone ahead and picked all my fixings as normal. I went ahead and installed one of the hatches just to see how straightforward it was, and it was very, very straightforward, in fact, just again following the instructions. The only thing of note I would say is that on the Armortek instructions they suggest that you use a hex bolt, one of these sort of these type bolts with a hexagonal head on it. But as you can see, the actual hatch has got a countersunk provision, so to me it makes sense to put countersunk fixings. Now Armortek do supply, as far as the fixing is concerned, you know, ample fixings, so there is some spares. So I've looked at it now and I've got enough to do this, so I'm going to replace the hex bolts with these. I have used the hex bolts as they described to fix the hinge to the other side of that, and the only other thing is that the actual brackets, again part of the machining process, don't necessarily fit. So as you can see, that's not going in there unless you try and drive it in. So I'm going to use my Dremel to just shave down the sides of these, because I want this to be, I mean, I'm very happy with the way that's operating, because it's actually, it's a really nice design, and it allows you to lift it up and clear it, so it's got almost a fully articulated hinge to it. So that's that. The only other thing that these things here, they come like that, but there's no mention of how you fix them, so I'm guessing we glue these. So a bit of super glue. It just goes in there. Like so. Just make sure that's fine, and it is. So the first thing I did was fix the hinge to the, oh actually before I do that, what I was wanted to show you is that part of the development of this top section is not only the hatches, but you've got the barrel cleaning rod clamps which go here and like so, and various tools which are from another company called Armortek. So these are obviously like a cast aluminium, and in the process is that they're fairly rough, but you know, they're going to need a bit of work and a bit of cleaning up to get them looking a bit more. I mean, I like the sort of the sort of aged look of them, but there's certain casting pieces here that you wouldn't necessarily want to see. And the other thing is, although they've got like the handle, that'll also need to be cleaned up just along these edges because they're quite rough. There's a pin here which will have to be cleaned up, and there's no corresponding hole. So however, they have put a, well, in this case it's off center, but they have put a center punch there just to identify where the hole should be. So that'll have to be drilled out and then super glued together and then painted separately and aged, etc. And the same goes for the shovel, which is nice detail shovel, but again just needs a bit of cleaning up. So that needs to be flattened off, viced in, and then a hole drilled through the center of that to facilitate the pin. And again, the whole thing painted up and looking dandy. And then you've got the actual Armortek kit itself, which are the gun barrel cleaning rods. Really nice detail. These ends here, I'm not sure if they actually screw together, but they look as if they're supposed to, but I think that's more of a scale detail. I'm going to basically use some antique brass paint that I've got on these pieces here, and then wood stain the rods to look as they should do. But I'm not going to do any of that until all of the tank is complete, all the painting is finished, and then I'll put these on top. So, but what I am doing is I'm putting all the deck mounted sort of pieces, because I want them to be the same color. So we'll pop those away for now, and we'll start. That should have gone off by now. So the first thing is that there is sort of the hinge bracket which goes on the back of that. They're fixed with Yes, this is what they sort of, they throw you off. These are the ones that they suggest that you should use the hex bolts, but I'm going to use the little countersunk fixings. So oh, it's when the old camera's on, I'm absolutely fingers and thumbs. It's a bit bizarre. Anyway. I'm not using thread lock or any of this, so I don't think we need it. And these are things that you can always get to tighten up in the event that they do work themselves loose. And the only reason I'm not using thread locker is that I'm still, wondering whether I'm going to have to do some adjustments on some of this stuff. But anyway, I mean, the bracket itself, the receptacle is nicely threaded, so I don't think we're going to need to worry about that. Just don't over tighten, just enough. So that's that. And as you can see, that is not going to go in there, not in a million years. And I know the same will go for this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to use my little Dremel. Going to get a bit noisy. I've got my goggles on, although you can't see me in the picture. That goes in there lovely now. I'm just going to use a screwdriver to just clean up the inside of that. So when the pin goes through, it's not affected. I'm going to have the same issue on this side, so I'm going to have to use the Dremel again. Now, again, like anything, metal does heat up. Does heat up, but with aluminium it doesn't get as hot as steel so quickly, so just keep an eye on that. If it gets too hot, just drop it down. Let's try that for size. Yeah, perfect. You don't want this to be too tight. I think you need it to be fairly loose. Yeah, that's nice. Right. So, need to put the bracket here. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the pin on this one first. Now you get two pins, both M4 gauge. Actually, you can see a bit of swarf on that one. Through that. This one's a 20mm pin that goes in the actual hatch, and the one that goes in the bracket, for obvious reasons, is a bit wider, so it's a 24mm pin. And Armortek suggests that you make sure that you put these in the right orientation, so that is the right orientation, not that. I mean, I know it's simple, but it's an easy thing to mistake, and once the pin's in, you're going to have a nightmare getting it out. I mean, you can get out, but why create more work? So just making sure I'm happy with that, and I am. So the smaller of the two pins, just going to put that on the edge of my bench. like so. Try and find my arse there. I'm trying to find the hammer. Little mallet I've got. And that's gone in lovely. Now, Armortek suggests, and I think that's right, to super glue the ends of these pins. You don't want these working loose and then getting lost. I mean, super gluing the end still allow the hinge to articulate, but hopefully lock these pins in place. So that's that. And while we're waiting for that to set, again, I know it's super glue, but you know, you still need to give it an opportunity to set. We're going to put this bracket on, so this means turning the deck the right way around. As you can see, I'll show you on this side. The hinge goes, the other bracket, hinge bracket goes on this side. So this is the top deck now completely finished. Really pleased how that's gone. Reasonably straightforward. I think when you first look at the instructions, if you've never built one of these before, it's a bit daunting, but actually it was really straightforward. And thanks again to Armortek for Armortek for being such a brilliant model supplier. Everything you know, so easy to follow. A little bit of fabrication, as you remember. You know, I had to cut these down a little bit. A little bit tricky, just getting some of the pins in, but you know, very reasonably straightforward. Got the mesh on now. Really pleased how that looks. Everything opens and closes as it should. All the little hatches. Very pleased with all of it. Really pleased. One thing I did, I changed my mind on, is when you, again, if you follow the instructions word for word or page by page, they'll tell you to put these sort of internal support ribs in very early stages, which is what I did. I've subsequently now decided that I don't want to be taking sections of this out. I want to be able to take the whole deck off at the same time. So what I did is I decided to remove the rib, so I can actually remove the whole thing in one piece, like so. So you can now see that that rib is attached to the deck, and that allows full access to the inside of the tank. That goes back in perfectly. Really pleased with that. So the next part for me would be, I guess, I'm going to put the battery, there's a panel that goes in the bottom of this which supports the batteries. I've got that. Armortek very kindly sent me that ahead of everything else, but there's no rush to put that in. But obviously the next bit would be for the turret and the gun assembly, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's been a fantastic journey. I've loved every single minute of the build of this. Some frustration, you know, some moments of frustration, shall I say, and some tedious times, you know, building those sort of wheels and tracks. But you know, I've looking back on it, I loved it. I've learnt some little skills myself, as well as bringing other skills I have already got to the build of this tank. So obviously, the next time we see this, I guess it will have its turret on it and its barrel. But I'll also, I'm planning to take this off at some point, do a bit of cleaning on it, prime it, and paint it so that the top section is completely finished. I will prime the underside of this and all of these, so when these flaps open, you'll see the primed finish. Other than that, you know, that's it for now. I'll see you shortly, and thanks again for joining me. I'm Tony, still trying to build his tank, and if you like this, thumbs up, subscribe, you know what to do. Thank you.